Good morning. Right now it is 9:02 on a Monday. I'm very excited. We're going to have an amazing time. We're going to be talking about Freestyle Magazine. I have some copies here in studio that I got my hands on. We're going to be learning everything from Tara Swigert about this publication, how it got started, how you can get a copy. Maybe you want to get involved. Let me know if you have any questions on our Facebook stream. Feel free to smash the share button. Let me know what you got going on today. We're going to have some fun. I'm going to switch it on the FM. We're going to get Tara introduced and learn everything that she has going on. Here we go. Good morning. This is KHEA Radio, 99.5 FM. Right now it is 9:03 on a Monday morning. It's a little bit rainy outside, and I'm not sure what the weather is doing today, but I did park underneath an awning because I don't want to get wet. And it does look like it's going to rain. 72 degrees in League City, but we're broadcasting live from Lamarck, Texas. I got Tara here in studio. Tara is with Freestyle Magazine, formerly Fruit Magazine. Tara, what's up? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited you're here. We communicated through Facebook Messenger, and I think that you went to an event with Kelly Redinger.
Yes.
And she said, hey, and she's a good connector of people. And did she say, hey, you should hang out with Gardy, come on KHEA? How did that go down?
Yeah, she was just like, after everybody had kind of gone, we hung out for a little bit and told her what we did, and she was just like, oh my gosh, you have to meet Gardy.
Cool.
She's like, I'm going to connect you right now. So she just went on right then and connected us on Facebook and was like, you need to meet with him. You know, he might want to have you on the show. So that's how that.
100%. Yeah. If Kelly says that, someone needs to be on and I need to meet them, then I want to meet them. And I'm excited. So we have a publication. It's called Freestyle Magazine. And I'm looking at this one right here. What actually is this? So what is Freestyle Magazine? What's inside? And what can somebody expect if they pick it up?
Yeah, so Freestyle Magazine is created specifically for youth in need of hope and healing, is what we say. Our primary audience is youth in juvenile detention, juvenile probation, but also just any youth that are struggling. It's a faith-based magazine. We do high-quality content and design to grab their attention. Inside the magazine, we have gang education, drug education, mental health education, as well as we have an article or a column that's specifically for our female readers. In that one, we deal a lot with human trafficking because a lot of the girls in these facilities have been trafficked, and a lot of them don't even know what that is. So we have a lot of awareness about that. What does it look like? So that they can catch those symptoms, but also help for them when they get out. And then we publish the artwork and writing of the kids, which is my very favorite part, and it's the kids' favorite part too. And so with that, we get this awesome artwork, but also their writing is a lot of them just want to tell their stories. They want to be heard. So this gives them a safe place to do that. It's confidential. And when they send us their work, if it gets chosen to be published, which we pretty much publish it unless it's got something in it that's not okay. But we send them a certificate in the mail. They get a certificate. So if they're in a facility, we mail the certificate to them right away. And they get so excited about these certificates. I hear from judges that they'll bring it to court with them to show the judge that they're doing something positive. And then when the magazine comes out, we send a copy to their home address so they get to have a copy of their published work.
It's a big deal. That sounds like it's a big deal.
It's a big deal to them. It is. I heard from a mentor recently who he mentored a young man that's in one of the state facilities. So a lot of times there's these kids, if they keep getting locked up, they keep getting in trouble, or it might be a larger offense, they'll be sent to one of the large state facilities where they can be there for 3 years. And so he was working with this young man who he said was like suicidal. He was so depressed. And every time he saw him, he could just see it. And then one day he walked in and the kid had a smile on his face and was so excited and showed him the certificate that he was chosen to be published. And
yeah,
just how much that meant to him, to give him that hope. Our kids are always recognized for all the negative things that they do. It carries from them from grade to grade wherever they go. So this is the opportunity for them to get recognized for something positive instead of always something negative.
Let's talk about you. So you are the founder of the magazine, right?
Yes.
This was your idea. It's your baby.
Yes.
Where are you from originally? Where are you from?
I'm from Sugar Land. So, yeah, I grew up, at first I was a Navy brat. So when I was young, we moved around a lot.
Yeah.
But in elementary, we kind of settled in Sugar Land, and I grew up there.
You grew up in Sugar Land, and I guess you mentioned earlier before we went on air, you had some time in Mississippi. And that's because of the military, like Navy, or
no. That's just my mom's family is from Mississippi.
Yeah.
My mom's one of 11 kids, and I've got 30-something first cousins up there. I have to say something because they keep coming. But yeah, so that's just we would go visit them.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, with the military, we lived in Hawaii and California, and then when it was time for me to really grow up and make memories, we moved to Houston.
So let me I want to understand it. Would that have been your choice? Like living in Hawaii, California, and then Sugar Land, Houston area. I'm sure they weren't letting you make the decisions as a child, but still, did you have a vote and be like, I want to stay in Hawaii? Or like, can we stay in California?
Yeah, I think growing up, I was always like, what was this about? How did this happen? Of course, we were living in bases where they were paying for everything. So when my dad was ready to get out, we had to move somewhere where he could find a job. So that's how we ended up here. And I think I'm happy with where I ended up because of all the great people I've met. And as I get older, I get more okay with the climate in Houston.
Yeah. So did you grow up, in church doing ministry? Is that something that you were drawn to at a young age?
I think at a very young age, I was drawn to Christ. So we didn't grow up when I was real young. We didn't grow up going to church. It was maybe second grade, third grade, we started going to church. And because of some stuff I'd gone through when I was younger, some traumatic things, I was really drawn to Jesus because I loved how powerful he was. I loved hearing that he loved me and that he, cared for me. So I was really drawn to him. And when I first, I got saved when I was 7, and I would tell all my friends about it and invite them to everything. And I'd go to all the youth stuff. So I think in that way I was. And then when I hit middle school is when I kind of started going down a different path, more away from God, which kind of led me to the type of friends that I was around, where we got into trouble. A lot of my friends started, going into juvenile detentions, stuff like that. And that's kind of where the process began without me knowing it, leading me to where I am today doing the type of work that I'm doing with these kids.
Yeah. So you go, you finish high school, and then what's the next step? Like, how did you pursue graphic design? Did you say like, hey, I want to go into ministry? I see some friends that, have picked different paths. What did you do after high school?
So after high school, I actually did not graduate high school. I ended up dropping out my senior year. I had struggled a lot with different issues through high school. And so I ended up dropping out, and I just started going to community college. And honestly, first I just took all the classes that I wanted to take.
Just kind of picking and choosing?
Yeah, a lot of art and theater, stuff like that.
You were drawn to that stuff?
Yeah, and government. Those were the ones I was interested in. But then I started mentoring in Fort Bend County. I started mentoring with youth there at 19, which was hilarious because I looked like I was 12. But they let me go in with these kids and do art.
Yeah.
And so I started doing art with them. And so I started with that. And then I went to school to do chemical dependency counseling. So I got my degree in chemical dependency counseling so that I could work specifically in the facilities with the kids. Okay,
you mentioned Fort Bend County, and what does that mean? Is that like a correction facility?
Oh, yeah. So I'm sorry. Fort Bend County is in Fort Bend, and the Fort Bend County Juvenile Probation Department, and so they have a detention center there, and that's where I would go in and I would do the art with the kids, mentoring. And then later, I actually got hired by Fort Bend County Juvenile Probation, and I did all the enrichment activities. I'd bring in artists and things for the kids to do
Yeah.
in the facilities. And I also worked with kids on probation. So I drive the big county van, which again was pretty funny because I could like barely see over the wheel, but I'd pick them up from school and we'd do life skills and take them to games and stuff like that. And that's when I decided I wanted to do counseling. And so I went to school for that. And then from there, I ended up doing my internship with Harris County juvenile probation in one of their detention facilities. That's detention facilities when a kid has gone to court. It's either they're going to wait for court, or once they go to court, they might get determined that they need placement. So instead of going home, they'll go to the facilities. So anytime I say facilities, that's what I'm talking about. It's where these kids are living after court while they're getting the support or the treatment that they need.
Yeah. So whenever you first started working with Fort Bend, was that volunteering?
I started out as a volunteer, and then later I ended up getting hired.
Okay. And then you decided to go to school for chemical dependency. What is that?
So it's just a drug counselor. So working with anyone who has addictions. So that's basically just learning how to do, one-on-one and group therapy with adults or youth. And I chose to work with youth.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you can specialize in the age group and how to communicate effectively.
Yeah, it's when you go into school, you're just learning, about addictions, how they work, and then the different types of ways that you can help people overcome those issues. So like ours, cognitive behavioral approach is how I learned, and a lot of what I did when I was working in the Harris County facilities.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Fort Bend to Harris County. And how long were you there?
I was at Fort Bend for, I think it was 2 years as an employee.
Mm-hmm.
I mentored there for 3 or 5 years before that. And then with Harris County, I was there for 5 years. And so I worked at 3 of their facilities. I started out at one called BBRC, which kind of was a more intensive program. There was kids that were there for 6 months for drug issues. So I worked there, and then they moved me to start. There was a girls program at another facility. And then later I moved down here. There's one in Seabrook. And so I worked there for 3 years.
Okay. What are some things that, I guess going into the job, any job, I feel like you kind of learn once you get there. You get and you're like, you think it's one thing in your head. You start working, next thing you know, 6 months later, it's like, that's a little bit different. Then it's like a year later and it's like, this is totally different than I originally imagined it. Mm-hmm. Was that the case for you going into these careers, even though you worked, 5 years, 2 years, 3 years at these different locations? And I'm sure the locations, there has to be some differences between. What are some things that you were totally different or slightly different than you imagined or that you even learned?
I think one of the things was just how difficult it was going to be. Addiction is a hard thing to overcome. So it was great in terms of when we had the kids here versus outpatient, they couldn't get to the drugs. So it was nice that they had a chance to just kind of take a break from all of that to actually get sober, to hear and to understand. But then seeing the recidivism. So when they would leave and then here they come right back. That was really, really hard. I think I imagined in my head that it was going to be a lot easier. But usually, that's how it goes. A lot of times with addiction, it takes, several times sometimes before somebody finally kind of gets the breakthrough or the help, that they really need. And then there's the issue of what I don't think I really considered before I started the job was the support system. I'm thinking I'm going to help them, then they're going to have these tools so then they can go out and they can do what they need to do. But not realizing how many of these kids lack a support system at home to adequately help them continue to stay sober, when for them it's a form of coping, it's a form of escape. And if all of the things they're trying to cope with and they're trying to escape from are not letting up,
Yeah.
at some point they turn back to what they know.
See, that's tough. Growing up, my parents are awesome. They still support me 100% in pretty much any decision that I would make. And so not having that support to me kind of seems foreign, and I'm very fortunate and blessed with that. But if they don't have their parents as a support system, I guess it's important for them to find anybody else who's going to support them. And a lot of times that was probably you.
Yeah, that would be us. We'd actually have kids that would come back to visit to see us. And I want to be clear, not all of the parents were that way. We had some great parents. And in that case, a lot of times it was just the friends that they put that they were surrounded by. But for us, we could be that support system to a degree. I would have, they would call to check in with us, things like that from time to time, but we weren't physically there. That's a big part of what we do now with Freestyle, is trying to connect them with churches that are close to them, with people that we know will make them feel welcome and, let them be a part of their family. Because I know that was a huge thing that they lacked before.
Yeah. And I mean, like, how young do these kids get before you? My son asked me a question the other day about breaking the law. He's 7 years old. And I don't try and scare him, but he says, what happens if, this happens? And I'm like, well, that's wrong. Somebody's getting in trouble. Like, well, can I go to jail? And I honestly don't. As a 7-year-old, I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe you could get removed and put in somebody else's care. But I'm trying to tell him, like, the reality of stuff without, scaring him into stuff. But he's curious. All kids are, for the most part, that they're going to be asking questions. At what age do these kids actually enter into facilities like that?
The youngest that I've ever seen, and this was years ago, there's a huge nationwide push right now, and it's really awesome. But to keep kids out of facilities. So they're doing a lot more diversion tracks. Judges are trying to give all different kinds of opportunities so that doesn't happen. So I think that you'll see that age go up, because the younger kids they're gonna really protect them from going into the facilities. But when I first started back in '99, the youngest kid I ever saw was 10 years old. And I was shocked, because I remember walking in and I was going in to see what kind of books they wanted, because I would put together a little library for them. And I was like, okay, what kind of books do you want? We're going around the room. It's like, oh, I want Stephen King. I want the Bourne. They love the Bourne series. And then I hear this kid's like, I like books about animals, and highlights magazines. And I look, and it's just this little guy sitting in there. I just was like, what?
Yeah.
But he was with his older brother, and they broke into a house, and they all got arrested. So it happens. A lot of that's when they can get locked up. But a lot of our kids start, in this type of lifestyle. I hear all the time, 8 and 9 years old.
Yeah, and then it's a matter of time almost. Let's see. Right now it's 9:20. This is KHEARadio.com, 99.5 FM. Talking to Tara Swigert. She is the founder. She is the CEO. She's the brains behind Freestyle Magazine. And we're learning her story and how this magazine came into existence. It's already gone through a name change, and I'm sure the original vision probably has altered in some ways. So you're working in the, I'm not even sure like what to call it, just like a correctional, you're a counselor, you're helping, minister to these kids whether they know it or not, just being someone who can listen and give them advice, right? Mm-hmm. At what point did that turn into the baby that is Freestyle Magazine, the idea to put something into print and give them a chance to write? Yeah,
so it basically was it kind of happened in stages. So the first thing I noticed, I love art. I love artwork, and I love writing. So I would do a lot of projects with the kids to get them to open up with different things, so I would do art with them, or I'd say, hey, write a poem or write a rap about, whatever it is that we were discussing. And so one of the things was I realized, man, these kids are really talented. They have a lot of talent. There's a lot of amazing artists and writers in there, and they have a lot to say. So the initial thought was, wouldn't it be cool to publish their artwork and their writing? So that was kind of the initial thought. And then another piece of it was, it's funny because God kind of put it together, and then I would see what he was doing. So I knew people that, for instance, James Odom, who writes our gang column, I met him when I was working there. And so I was like, oh, it would be cool to have him share something, but that we could then share it with kids all over. So we added that section. So slowly we added more and more sections to the magazine. So the idea was initially, like, how can we publish the kids' artwork? And then it was just, ooh, what else can we give them? What else can we put in there? So that's how the vision kind of initially came together. And it took a long time before we put out the first magazine. It was still like 4 years.
So what year was the first one launched?
Oh
this
gosh,
one says
I can't remember.
issue 21. I mean, how often do these come out?
I think the first one probably came out in 2011.
Okay.
So they have come out because I have to raise the funds to be able to print. So for the first several years, we would do 2 or 3 a year because I was working at the same time. The last 2 years, we've been able to put out 4, so it comes out quarterly.
How much money does it take to print one of these, and on average?
On average, we say $5 per copy is basically what. That doesn't include the whole cost of getting it done, like the work that goes into it. But that's the basic. It's $5 per copy. It's about 60 pages, full color. We work really hard to make it attractive to the kids. So the idea is the kids that won't pick up a Bible might see this and be like, oh, what's this? And read it.
Cool. Yeah, there's some really good art in here, and it has their names. Eric, 17, and he wrote a scripture and has a picture in here, and it's really, man, these are some powerful things. And a lot of the times it's hard to find the words to describe how you feel in a situation. And whenever you find, like someone, you don't even have to be necessarily talented to just pick it up and find something. Hey, this picture is speaking what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And can you think of a time? So I ask people that you're reading something and all of a sudden it just was like, whoa,
yeah,
that was for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it just sticks with you. And it's like, what, like game changer. I've had that so many times just reading scripture where all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wait, you were just you're talking directly to me right now. Like you get it in your spirit and and that's what I want the magazine to be for these kids. I pray over the magazine before it goes out. I'm like, I want you to just infuse these magazines with your presence. Like, there's so much darkness where these kids come from. And I'm like, all right, here's the light. Here's, the magazine. We can send it out anywhere that we can get it, that we can find sponsors, to cover the cost, that we can put it in there. It goes out and it's a light in that darkness. Like that is what I want. That's, God is there. And so for them, they're over and over again. We've heard so many amazing stories of kids that just read something at just the right time and it spoke to them and it in that moment and helped them. And what they maybe aren't saying, but what I know is true, is that in that moment they know God sees them.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow.
That's what I want them to know because they are the unseen. They
mm-hmm.
go to these facilities or even kids in the communities. They're unseen. They're dealing with so much that they keep hidden. And so they feel alone. The most popular kid can feel completely alone in a crowd. So when they're one-on-one and they're reading and it just hits them, God speaks to them in that moment. They know that they're seen. They know that they're cared about and there's hope there. And that's my passion for the magazine. You
mentioned, earlier about it being called something different. So it used to be called Fruit.
Yeah.
Where did that name Fruit come from? And then how did you end up with the switch?
Yeah, so originally we named it Fruit Magazine, and we're Freestyle Ministries is the ministry. And we called the magazine Fruit Magazine originally for the scripture, thus by their fruit you will recognize them. So the idea was we wanted them to be recognized by their fruit. So they were always recognized for something negative. This is something positive coming out in them. And so we wanted them to be recognized by their fruit, by what they were doing, not by their past. So that was kind of the original reason for the name Fruit. The switch happened because mostly the kids were confused sometimes by the name. They didn't get it because if you don't grow up in church and you don't hear that terminology a lot, it's kind of like, what is this? What is this? I don't know what this means. Whereas freestyle, they get that. They understand that. They know the word, freestyle from freestyling or freestyle dancing or whatever, which is why we named the ministry Freestyle. And so that was something that was easier for them to grasp and to understand the meaning of. And then also we did it because for branding purposes. So every time I would meet with somebody, I would talk about Freestyle Ministries and they're like, wait, but what about Fruit Magazine? And so it was almost like it was two separate entities. And I'm trying to say, no, they're the same. Like Freestyle Magazine is Freestyle Ministries. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So it makes it easier from a branding standpoint to be able to just, we're one thing, we're freestyle. And that's all the kids have to remember, freestyle. So that was why we made the switch. And I love it. I'm super excited about it. The kids already have responded that they really like it. And the scripture for this one is if the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. And that's even though, they're in a facility, even though some of them might be transferring to prisons, they can know that they can still be free even while they're in those places.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. One more thing about you in school. You mentioned whenever you first started going to college, you were taking some classes, art and theater and art. So you had a passion for, was it design or drawing or poetry or just all of the above? And so that's what you kind of were drawn to. And did you find out, hey, I'm good at this? And is that something you still actively do, on a daily basis?
Yeah, I wish I had more time for it. I do still love doing artwork and I love writing. So it was kind of cool that God gave me this to do because I get to do the art. I do the graphic design for the magazine, so I design it. So that's my artistic outlet with that. Sometimes it's a frustrating artistic outlet, and I have to turn to my husband, who's an actual graphic designer, to be like, this looks horrible. How do I fix this?
Yeah.
But he taught me all the do's and don'ts, like no Comic Sans. I know what fonts not to use.
Yeah, that one's not allowed. It's not really professional. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like you didn't take classes specifically on graphic design. I mean, you don't have to, like, but you and you kind of got taught and teach yourself and tutorials and stuff. Right.
And so I love that. I still do, I love drawing. I love painting. So I still do that. And I still write when I have time. So I'll, just for my own enjoyment, not for work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I still have a passion for that. And I loved theater too. So that was another big piece of it. Because I wrote plays and things like that. So that was kind of fun. So it's fun for me to see what the kids write and to, help them because we'll edit it and show them the edits so that they understand why we made certain changes or, the grammar and spelling just so that they learn from that as well.
Yeah. So whenever you write now, what kind of stuff do you focus on? Like, what's the topics? Are you still writing plays, doing some theater stuff, or just maybe some poetry, or what kind of stuff are you writing about?
So now, like I said, I don't have much time for writing. It takes a while, but I like to write short stories or pieces of what could be a play or pieces of what could be a novel at some point. So I really like fiction. I like to imagine that I'm somebody else and what that feels like and, go from there.
Yeah, one time, so I have a friend named Luke who is the director at a local library, and I asked him what kind of stuff he reads, if and when he has time. And he went down this whole thing, and I was like, Luke, I feel like you're making these names up. These are people I've never heard of. I was expecting, something like, I like to read, The Lord of the Rings or something like that. But it was like way deeper. And I was like, I'm going to have to write this down because I'm going to check. I'm not going to read them. I'm going to make sure that they're real things.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But, okay. Let me see. Let's do an identification. This is KHEARadio.com, 99.5 FM. It's 9:32 on a Monday. We're talking to Tara with Freestyle Ministries about Freestyle Magazine. You mentioned your husband. You know, he's a graphic designer. He does some videography work and some music videos and all kinds of cool stuff. When did y'all meet, and how has he, I guess, helped, birth freestyle with you? Or has that not been the case? Like, when did y'all meet?
So we met 16 years ago. I almost said 13. We've been married for 13 years. We met 16 years ago. He was DJing, and they had they were doing a listening party and for an album release. And so I showed up there, and that's where we met.
Yeah.
While he was DJing.
At what point in your life were you at? Were you currently in school still, or what were you doing?
During that time, I think I was still going to school for chemical dependency counseling, and I was running a daycare. And so that's where I was at during that time. And then we, dated for 3.5 years, and then we got married, and he became a youth minister. And when it came time, he had quit his job to do the youth ministry. And then when I got the vision for freestyle, I was so terrified because I was going to have to tell him, I really think I need to quit my job so that I can pursue this. And I remember being so scared, and I was reading Esther at the time, the book of Esther, and she prayed for 2 weeks before she brought the, proposal to her husband. And so that's what I did. I didn't say anything for 2 weeks. I just prayed on it. And then when I told him that I feel like I need to do this, and he said, okay, well, God will make it work. And he did. And so he was very, very supportive. Of course, he a lot of the first issues, he did a lot of the designing for them. He did a lot of the graphic design because I still didn't know what I was doing. But slowly he taught me, and I got better and better at it. I still haven't learned how to do masks, and it drives him crazy. If any of the Photoshop people out there, y'all are like, she doesn't do masks. But so he still helps from time to time with the design work of it. But he's always been super, super supportive of the ministry. And, he's the one I talk to when I get flustered or when I feel like, I don't know if we can do this anymore, or I don't know how this is going to happen. He's the rock that I go to that is like, God's going to take care of this. Let's just have faith. Let's just keep moving.
Whenever you first felt like this needs to come to pass, was it scary?
Oh, yeah, it was scary. I was really, really excited at the time because I had this idea of like, okay, here's this idea, and I go from 0 to 60. Like I'm like, we're going to get all the funding we need, and this is going to be amazing, and it's, going to be nationwide, right? Like that's the dream. And that's not how it happened. It took 4 years before we were able to even get the first one out. And that was, we incorporated in 2007. So it's been a long time. And we're just now kind of getting that momentum going in the last, 4 or 5 years is where we've really seen a lot of the momentum start. So I think I was really excited in the beginning. I was a little nervous. It was scary because it was scary to quit and step out in faith like that. But God provided over and over and over again. So now it's still scary. It's I just listened to a Beth Moore study, and she was talking about if you're afraid to do it, then do it afraid. And I was like, okay, so it's okay to be afraid as long as I still do it. And so that's kind of where I'm at today, where I'm just kind of walking day by day. Just do it afraid. Because you never know what, is going to happen next. So I don't know if we're going to get the funding that we need. This last year, I wasn't able to raise the full amount that we needed. So this coming year, we're going to be able to put out 3 issues instead of 4. But you know what? That's God's plan. And it's a part of whatever he's doing, wherever he's shifting. So I just have to continue to walk in faith and, just follow his lead.
Yeah. What's been the hardest part about it all? Has it been funding or something else?
Yeah, the hardest part has been fundraising. I think it was the biggest leap outside of my comfort zone. So comfortable going in, talking to the kids, working with the kids. I love it. Like, completely comfortable going in and working with them. Comfortable with the writing. Not so much with the editing, but I have some amazing volunteers that edit the magazine to help with that portion of it. So the most outside of my comfort zone has been doing the fundraising. I'm like a background person. So like even, with theater, I enjoy doing the background stuff, or, I like to write and then other people, put it on. So being out there in front of people asking for support has always been a challenge for me.
Yeah. Asking for money is not easy.
No.
I feel like it's not natural.
It's not. And, but it's you have to do it. And I have to remember, like, I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for the kids so that they can keep getting this resource. And I'm doing it to further God's voice in their life, to open that door for him to have an avenue to speak to them. And that's what I'm doing. So I just continue to go. And like my husband constantly reminds me, just be yourself. Because you get nervous. You think like, oh, I have to be so polished. I have to have the perfect speech. I have to have the perfect thing to say. But it really comes down to, if somebody's supposed to give, then God will move them to give. And you just tell your story and just be yourself, and I have to keep putting myself out there, and then just see what happens, what comes from it.
Is the majority of the funding from different organizations or from individuals? Is it a mixture of both?
So the majority of the funding right now comes from the Stoller Foundation, and they've been amazing. They work as an incubator program. So you go in and they give you like a large amount at the first year, and then the second year it's less. And then by the third year, it's even less. And then you're supposed to be on your own. So we'll start the third year this coming year with the Stoller Foundation. So a large portion of what we get comes from them, but I've got to, replace that.
Yeah.
And then we have some really incredible monthly donors who give, a set amount every month. And the other large majority of what we get comes from people who sponsor specific facilities or specific organizations to receive the magazine. So like Youth for Christ, they sponsor copies for kids in Denver. And some of the other locations also get copies for their kids because they work in juvenile facilities in other states. So right now, Freestyle goes to 25 different locations. So we're reaching thousands of kids every time.
Do those different locations also contribute as well? Like they'll enter stuff?
Yeah, so the kids will enter. They can submit. So any kid can submit artwork. I'm always telling the ones at our church, like, y'all submit some stuff for us, and we've had that. One cool story was that we had a girl that's a homeschooled kid from our church. It was actually her friend who was also homeschooled, had written a short story, and it was a very intricate, super interesting short story. It was pretty long, or I would have brought it today to share, but it was talking about the power of language. So like the power, she wrote it as the perspective as a word, like personifying this word and the power that word had. And it was really, high level work. And so we loved it. We put it in the magazine. And months later, I'm at one of the facilities. We were doing a concert, and this young man calls me over, and I sit down, and he was like, I remember this story that I read. And he remembered like the whole thing. And this is a kid that's like in gangs, like hardcore kid, talking about a story that this young, homeschooler church kid, had written. And he said, I was so depressed that night that I kept looking at the magazine, and I read that story. And he's like, and it just helped me forget what was going on. He was like, I thought it was so cool how she did that, how she made the word a person. And he was like, and it really, really helped lift my spirits that night. And so I got to go, tell this girl, like, hey, look,
Yeah.
And I think that's been one of the coolest things about the magazine is it's always the stuff that I have nothing to do with. that's the coolest, you know? And so I think one of the big ones is just how the kids have taken ownership of it. It's their magazine. It's for them. And so they've taken ownership of it so that they begin to minister to each other through the magazine. So if you look at any of the magazines, you'll see when you go to the kids' writing, so many of them title it My Story. That's because it started with one kid wrote My Story is what they titled it. And he wrote about when he was abused by his mom's boyfriend. And he was completely open with what happened. And I remember getting that letter and being like, whoa, this is deep. Like, do I put this in? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to put it in. And I put it in. The next issue, we had 3 more kids write in about a similar thing that had happened to them. So his opening up gave them freedom. Oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. And there's power in putting that out there. There's power in putting that into words and putting it, you know, for people to see. That's a freeing thing for them. They're no longer the victim hiding in secret. And we know that the enemy thrives in secret. You know, when you bring it out into the light, that's when you can find healing. So it was really cool. So now you'll see in these the next issues, you'll see my story, because they want to be heard. And this gives them that chance to be heard. And a lot of times what I love is at the end of my story, they'll tell, you know, what they've gone through, and they'll say, don't give up. Don't give up. They write specifically to their peers. Don't give up. Keep pushing. God loves you. So that's, you know, been the very, very coolest thing that I've seen, is that they've taken ownership of it and that they're actually using it to mentor one another.
Wow. You know, do you get a lot of feedback like that? That, like you said that guy, you know, the homeschool girl, the story, you know, not even just from them writing and sharing their story too, but people just saying like, wow, this really ministered to me, or this saved my life, or anything like that.
Yeah, we get, we get a lot of letters from the kids that write us. A lot of times, I love it. A lot of them are thank you letters. They get their certificate, and they write us and say, thank you so much for publishing. I was, I had one guy write, like, I was in tears because I couldn't believe that I was actually being published. Or this, you know, has really meant so much to me. This has changed my life. Like, and I'm just like, wow, okay. You know, it's incredible to hear how God is using it in their lives. So yeah, we receive a lot of those. And the reason I think it's cool that it's a thank you letter is, like, how many times us as adults don't remember to say thank you or to send a thank you note. And here are these kids, you know, they have a limited number of envelopes and paper to use and stamps, and they're using that to write back to say thank you. I think is really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've heard a lot of stories. One of them was actually, okay, so we have a section in the magazine that's called the Inbox. And we work with adult inmates as well, so in prison. And we give them specific topics to write on, and to our kids. So then they write a letter, like they're writing a letter to our kids on a specific topic that we give them. So one of them might be like, what does it really mean to have respect? Because these kids think it means to be feared. And so these guys will write back and say, I thought that's what it meant, but respect really means this, you know, how I look up to these pastors that come in and talk to us or whatever. Or so different topics they'll write in, and the kids can read that. But whenever these adult inmates, when they write in, if we publish it, we send them a copy to the prison, so they get to have a copy as well. These, the magazine has been like taken through all these prison systems now. I wasn't even like focused on adults, but it's ministering to adults as well. And so we had one guy who, it was part of his testimony. He was sharing it one day. He worked with Eyes on Me, which is an organization my husband works with. And he shared his testimony, that he was in prison, and he, a guard had snuck in a copy of our magazine. I don't even know where this guard got the magazine from, but he had snuck in a copy of the magazine and given it to them. And on the cover of it we had a picture of a Christian rapper who used to be like a gangster rapper, and his face is completely covered face and neck completely covered in tattoos. And in the article, he shares how he was able, instead of being ashamed of those tattoos, he was able to see how God could now use those for positive, because he could go and walk into places and neighborhoods and talk to people and be heard where somebody like me, like I couldn't. Well, this guy was in prison and he was completely covered in tattoos, and he felt like God would not love him or use him because of that. And because he read that article, he realized, oh, that's not true. I don't have to look a certain way for God to love me and God to use me. And that led him to his point of, accepting Christ and moving forward. So we hear stories like that as well that have been pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Let's see. We got about 8 minutes left. This is KHEARadio.com, 99.5 FM, talking to Tara Swigert with Freestyle Ministries about Freestyle Magazine. You mentioned earlier that I think there's going to be 3 issues this year. That's the plan.
Yes.
3 issues this year. Where do you ideally see Freestyle going in the future? Like, if everything, God's will and your heart align, where do you see Freestyle going in the future?
I would love to see Freestyle go to every single juvenile facility in the country. That's my heart, is that it would go to every single facility, and to community organizations and in the actual communities. I would love to have them in the barber shops and, just around the city where people can pick them up. So that's the dream. And that it would come out at least 4 times a year is kind of the goal. I think that's a good amount for it. In the magazine, we have discussion questions in the back that go along with the articles. So we actually do fruit clubs in the facility, or freestyle clubs in the facilities, where they read an article and then they discuss it so that they can apply it personally to their lives. So I'd love to see a lot more of those happening as well in, the facilities or in youth groups. I'd love to see it used more in that way as well.
Are there issues online? Can
yes,
somebody check this out on the internet?
Yeah, they're all online, so you can see them at freestyleministries.com. Super easy.
Yeah, you can check it out, freestyleministries.com. And if you look at the website, which I checked out earlier, you can read about you and a little bit about your background, and there's some other people on there as well. Who else is on the website that helps make this possible?
So we have we have a ton of volunteers. They're not on the website, but we have some amazing volunteers that do the editing and writing for us. Some of our contributors are Burrell Richardson from Youth for Christ, James Odom with Alternative Behavior, Julie Waters, she's with Free the Captive. She writes a lot of our Hey Ladies columns. Kayla Allison also writes some of those columns for us. Kyle Jackson, he's the youth minister over at Heritage Park Baptist Church. He writes a lot of our devotionals as well. So they're on there. And then our board of directors, we have Kay and Rudy Guerrero and Elisa Gonzalez, who help keep us, on track as far as the board goes. So those are some of the key people that help with the magazine. Yeah.
It is important to seek counsel, like to have that board and volunteers and just hear a voice and make sure that you're, doing the best thing, because there's so many different ways to get a message out, and then kind of keeping track of that. It helps. Is it ever gets to the point where it's like, well, let's do this, and it's like too much. It's like, well, we got to narrow it down, make sure that we stay on track.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we have an awesome volunteer. She used to be on staff with me, but she recently took another position. Carolyn Brame. She does our social media, and so she does the marketing piece. So that's been huge because obviously that's a huge part of what we do. And so I'm always coming up with ideas. And so she helps a lot with let's go down, let's focus on what we can do now.
Yeah.
So I would love to do a podcast in the future. We talked about that earlier. Right now, that's not something that we can do. So we focus on, getting the magazine. This is, the magazine's number one. It has to be done with excellence. And we want it to do, something that's really going to have an impact on them.
Okay, I changed my mind. Let's just make it go to the podcast and have some fun there instead. I'm just kidding. No, but podcast, it's really simple. It's really easy once you get your workflow. It's just a matter of time. That's one thing that I've talked to people about that work in. I've seen photographers who have podcasts. I've barbers that have podcasts. It's just trying to make sure you have that time. Like, how long is my podcast going to be? 30 minutes, an hour? What are we going to talk about? Am I going to be able to find content? You can always find something, but it is a lot of fun. Whenever it falls into place and it works out, I think you'd be great at it.
Well, I'll definitely come to you to
I'll help you get started. We got
come
this.
to that, yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share while you're here today?
I would, if it's okay. I'd like to read one of the poems that one of our kids wrote.
Yes.
Can I do that?
Of course.
Okay. Okay. I just absolutely love this poem. It was written by Sierra, who is 18 years old. And she says, "They say all we want is money, all we want is fame, lights in our face, people screaming our name. They say we're the bad kids who steal the money and force the fame, who roll too deep with 10 toes in the game. But they're wrong. You see, we all have different places. We all show anger in different ways and hide pain with different faces. But we're the same. We've all been hurt and let down, kicked and shoved face first so hard into the ground by the ones who say they're here for you, shed a tear for you. Next thing you know, you hold them dear to you, and then they're gone, just like a magician in the smoke. But soon they reappear, wanting back the very heart they broke. So the nights are long when you're fighting for your life, but you would rather be shot down than stabbed in the back with that knife again, because that pain's too much to bear when you've lost the only people who you thought could ever care. So we turn all hope to God and we pray until we're weak, just so we can hear that we must turn the other cheek, and it's hard. Oh yes, I know it's hard indeed, but to speak truthfully, this is the kind of love we need. So brothers and sisters, stop judging for what's been done, because we must withstand the rain if we wish to see the sun. Why push each other down, head beneath the sand, when we could speak the words of love or give a helping hand? So before you set your mind that we're kids who mean no good, just ghettos from the hood, please take the time to realize that we're quite misunderstood."
Wow, that was really good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And that's powerful. It's, as somebody who grew up in church, as somebody who currently goes to church, it's really easy to pretend like you have a perfect life. Social media kind of sets us up for that, and especially the holiday season, everything is not always great all the time. And to be open about that takes a lot of courage. To be open about that, it's a big deal, and to have these kids who, I remember being a kid and going through stuff, but you just put on a face, but to be open, that takes a lot of courage, and that takes a lot of talent to put that into words. That's really good.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Let's see. This has been Kickstart on KHEA Radio, 99.5 FM. If you are watching on Facebook, feel free to share this out. It will continue to roll out and play throughout the day. Tara, thank you so much for hanging out today.
Thank you.
All right. This is 99.5 FM, KHEA Radio. Bye, Facebook.